Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Tim Russell, Vice President, Community Engagement for WTTW, WFMT, and welcome to today's virtual Behind the Screen look at Chicago Tonight Voices. WTTW's purpose is to enrich lives, engage communities, and inspire exploration. Through our broadcast and digital platforms, we educate and entertain children and families and share the stories of women and men who have influenced Chicago, America, and the world. At this moment, I would like to show you the trailers to WTTW Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, and WTTW Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. Enjoy.
When we first opened up this shop, we wanted to be a symbol of hope for the community, showing that something like this can be successful in a neighborhood like Back of the Yards is truly something special.
En los días que no estoy trabajando.
The great thing I would say about Albany Park is that while we are defined as a Latinx community, we're a mix of everything.
No matter what color our skin is, our blood comes out red, our tears come out clear. This is our community.
It builds morale to see people that look like you winning and making it.
A lot of Inglewood residents are making changes for themselves, but we do need resources. Equity is an issue.
Let's get first into the impact of the pandemic in this community.
You have to think about what is the realistic scale of people living in these neighborhoods. You're coming here and you have to get fed by your own neighborhood. So this is the community feeding itself. It's an amazing thing.
It's the past, present, and future of the city.
Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Sylvia Ewing, and it's my pleasure to give you this behind-the-scenes look at this special new programming available from WTTW, Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, and Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. And this is a WTTW News community conversation. That means that you have a special part in this evening. We want to hear from you during the chat. We're going to look behind the scenes to see what we can expect when these two new programs premiere in just a few days. But right now, let me do a little housekeeping. Now, for some of you, this could be your third, fourth, fifth Zoom meeting of the day. So be patient with me as I make sure that others who may be less familiar with the platform know how to participate and engage. So we want to hear from you in the chat, and that function is next to with a little square on your screen if you move your mouse around. But first, I'm also going to ask you to please mute your telephones, mute your devices, make sure you're on mute so that everyone can enjoy this conversation. And because we're using Zoom webinar, that feature, you're only going to see our panelists this evening, not the other participants, but you can adjust your view by clicking the screen view in the upper right-hand corner. And we are recording this evening's conversation, and relevant links will be posted on WTTW's digital channels. So that's the background. I hope you're ready to participate. Now we can begin. WTTW is launching Chicago Tonight Latino Voices and Chicago Tonight Black Voices to provide thoughtful, accurate, in-depth information and perspective from these communities. We want to make sure that current events are covered, and as Tim said, that you are informed and engaged. And we want to create opportunities for real conversation. and voices that often have been left behind. Tonight, I will ask the questions that I think you want to hear, and I encourage you to put in chat the questions that you think that I may have missed, so that we can get a look at what these programs are going to bring to us when they debut. On Saturday, September 12th at 6 p.m., Latino Voices will debut. And on the next Sunday, September 13th, also at 6 p.m., Black Voices will debut. And they're going to stream live on WTTW.com/news, Facebook, and YouTube. So they'll be incredibly accessible. And this commitment from WTTW to these stories in these communities will be available for all. Lead support for Chicago Tonight Black Voices is provided by Fifth Third Bank, and additional support comes from Gertrude and James Wooten Jr., the Joseph and Bessie Feinberg Foundation, and Nicholas Antoine. Support for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices is provided by CIBC. So let's get right into taking a different look at a couple of people who you may think you know. Brandis Friedman has been at WTTW News since 2013. She has covered some of the most important stories in Chicago and in the region and in the nation. And you can see her every evening as co-anchor with Paris Schutz of Chicago Tonight at 7 p.m. Weeknights, and also at events around the community. Hugo Balta just joined WTTW in January, and what a critical difference he's made since he's been here. He was named the news director and executive producer of Chicago Tonight, and that's the station's flagship public affairs nightly news program. Hugo is an innovative and seasoned news executive with a proven track record of success across media and a deep understanding of the importance of local journalism. So without further ado, welcome Hugo and welcome Brandis. And Brandis, you're right off the set of Chicago Tonight. So we've had you running. Thank you so much for your energy. I'm going to start with you and just find out why now and why you in terms of this programming. So WTTW Black Voices.
So I think, the why now, anyone could have, done these two stories, these two shows at any time, right? But I'm thankful that we are doing it now, because I think if we look around us, there are, communities of people who feel like their voices are not being heard. I think the reckoning that we're having right now is reflective of that. And I think there are some people who are looking around going, I don't understand why this is happening and why it's happening the way it is. So, it could have been done anytime, but there is no time like the present. And so I'm really glad that we're doing it. And why me? Honestly, I'm just lucky to be here. And I am thankful and honored that I will have the opportunity to help share these stories. I have always been legitimately very curious and very interested in Chicago's history. I think the city has a very rich Black history and obviously a very rich Black culture. And while I am not from Chicago, I have made it my home for almost 9 years. And so I'm very curious about this history, and I'm thankful that I get to dig in and to share those stories with other people.
Well, thank you. That's a very humble response. You have earned your chops and will provide so much value to this programming. Hugo, turning to you, the same question for Latino Voices. Why now and why you?
Well, continuing what Brandis just said, I think it's very important that WTTW News, as it's done historically, lead the conversation that's happening in our country, certainly in the aftermath of George Floyd, but including COVID-19, where we've seen the disparities between different communities that are separated more than just geographically, but separated because of a lack of access to resources like healthcare, education, employment. And why me? Again, just to reiterate what Brandon says, because I'm lucky. I'm the person that's in the right place, perhaps at the wrong time, depending on what your perspective is. But I'm eternally grateful to be part of a team that really digs in, that roll up their sleeves, that from the beginning has said, what do we need to do during this time in our country? COVID-19, the racial unrest following the death of George Floyd, and most recently in Kenosha, but also as we walk into the presidential elections. You know, we are literally producing content that is not only empowering the community, but as demonstrated with COVID-19, saving lives. And it's something that I'm honored to be part of and grateful for.
Well, thank you, Hugo. These are unique times, and you have such a historic space, such a historic platform with the Chicago Tonight brand and name. We were talking earlier when we had a run through, and I mentioned how Nightline started in response to the Iran hostage crisis. And it was one of those examples where news stepped up to make sure that there was deep and ongoing coverage of an issue and lasted for years. Chicago Tonight was created around the time of the Harold Washington election, and maybe in the chat people might remember if it was during the election or during council wars, but it has gone on to be the premier public affairs program in the region. So Hugo, you're in charge of news. Tell us a little bit about what your Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, what's the format? What can we expect?
The format's going to be very familiar to our avid viewers. It is an extension of what they're seeing Monday through Friday on Chicago Tonight. We're continuing the conversations that we have during the week, on the weekends, and of course, providing greater visibility and voice to the Black and Latino community. The format is going to be one that's a news magazine program. So we're going to have discussions, panel discussions about topics that matter most to the community. We're going to have one-on-one conversations with leaders in our community that are really inspirational and aspirational. I think it's very important for us to use our platform to not only talk about the challenges that the community has, but also the collective solutions and opportunities that we need to reach. And then finally, we're going to also highlight arts and culture. You know, arts, music, food, these are connectors. They're bridge builders that help people that perhaps have different backgrounds, different ideologies come together. And so we're going to showcase not only the challenges that the communities face and absolutely hand them the mic in order to listen to them, but also to beat the drum of the successes that are occurring every single day in Chicago and in the surrounding areas.
And Brandis, I'll turn that question to you as well. What will the format be for you, and what are you looking forward to?
So the formats will be fairly similar for each show, and sort of building on what Hugo just explained. You know, it'll be somewhat similar to Chicago Tonight, right? In that we will still have panel discussions and we'll still have one-on-one interviews with newsmakers, particularly from the Black community, and not just, you know, voices from the Black community, but also the story that, you know, through the lens of what it is like to be a Black Chicagoan. So that'll be part of it. We'll also have, you know, packaged pieces where we go out into the field and shoot the story and, you know, edit it together and bring it back. I'm excited that our arts correspondent, Angel Ito, I think she finds really, really great stories in the arts community that most of us hadn't thought of. And so I'm excited to include her contributions as well. You know, one thing that we've heard as of late a lot is that, you know, people like me, reporters, the media, we only show up in some Chicago communities when something bad happens. And so I don't want to be accused of that. I want to show up all the time, right? Just because we want to get to know this community, because this is where people live and work. And we're giving people the opportunity to tell their story and tell us what's going on in their community, the good and the not so good sometimes.
And I'm hearing, I'm seeing questions on the chat, but just to make sure to folks at home know, these programs are extending into the weekend. This is really an exciting commitment from WTTW and an investment in our communities. So on Saturday, September 12th, that is the start of Latino Voices, hosted by Hugo at 6 p.m. And on Sunday, September 13th, it will be Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, hosted by Brandis. And, you know, speaking of the very specific perspective and audience that you are speaking to, isn't this also an opportunity to build bridges? Is everyone welcome to become a viewer? What do you have in store, Hugo, for allies who may be from other communities, but who want to better understand the Latinx community in this region?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because I think sometimes what happens with initiatives like Voices is the misconception that if you're not a member of that particular community, in the case of Latino Voices, Latinos, and Black Voices Black, that program isn't for you. But you don't need to be a member of the community to be part of Voices, to be part of the conversation. And that's really important, because inclusivity is one of the paramounts of what these two programs and WTTW News, both on broadcast and on digital, are based out of. There is room for all voices around the issues that are affecting both the Black and Latino community. So some of the inclusivity is going to be that this program, of course, is going to highlight members of the community that are Latino when we're talking about Latino voices, but it's also going to showcase other members of the community that are working in this space. There could be a doctor, for example, that is working on obesity, where Latinos over-index on, but they don't necessarily have to be Latino to be part of the program. You could have a doctor that's Latino that is spearheading research around cures for breast cancer, which affects, of course, all different communities, including the Latino community, but not specifically the Latino community, and they're welcome. So again, this is about bringing the community together, and as you said, building bridges so that we can have some candid conversations about the challenges that we're facing, and of course, with an emphasis on the Latino and Black community, but the solutions are about all of us. We all have skin in the game. And one of the things that we've noticed in the last couple of weeks in the various protests that led by the Black community, that side by side with members of the Black community are members of the Latino community, the Asian community, the white community. That's because in this moment in history, we all understand that equality and for the Black community, equality for people of color means equality for all of us.
Well, thank you, Hugo, and we can see your passion. Chicagoans are getting to know you more. I think that they're going to appreciate the media literacy and deep experience that you bring in these issues. You've got a little bit of gray going on, as do I. So, you know, there's a wealth of maturity there. But Brandis, I love the deeper, different look that people will be able to obtain of your work and your style, because when folks see you as an anchor and you are seriously, you know, reading that news and sharing your perspective and reporting, those of us who know you know that you're a mom, you know, you're a Southern girl who has made Chicago your home. And you bring just a humor and a curiosity that people may find to be unexpected. What side of yourself do you look forward to sharing? And as a Black woman in these very unique and unprecedented times, you know, what do you look forward to diving into for Chicago Tonight Black Voices?
Well, first, thank you, Sylvia, for your kind words. But yeah, I am all of those things that you just mentioned. I grew up in Mississippi. I went to college in New Orleans and grad school in New York. I have two little boys. One is 7 and one will be 16 months this week. He grows so fast that I forget how old he is. So as I mentioned earlier, I've always been very curious about Chicago's Black history and its culture, because I think it is so rich. And so obviously I'm interested in telling today's stories, but I'm also really interested in, we're going to do sort of a series of segments called The Throwback, basically, where we dig into the archive that WTTW has lots of, and we pull out a piece of Black history from Chicago. And I'm interested in that, just because it's interesting and I think it's important to look back, but also because I feel like there are pieces of history that explain why we are here today. And there are pieces of history that explain the inequity that exists today. And so, at Chicago Tonight, I've spent a lot of time covering education and other subjects, but mostly I'm the education reporter here. And I feel like I've seen some of that in my 4 or 5 years covering education. And that's just an example. It exists obviously in healthcare and housing and so many other ways. And so I'm interested in talking about how all of that got us to where we are today. And of course, talking to, modern leaders and policymakers and activists about the way forward.
Well, and the archives are really exciting because they are rich. You're going to find everything from when Muddy Waters came here to play and the Rolling Stones sat in with him, to the stories of the Willis wagons and all of the other reasons that Chicago is as it is and why we're so unique. But a question for both of you. Hector Garcia Chavez asked all panelists, and I'm just going to make this speak to both of you. Latinx communities are diverse, multicultural, and resilient. He says that some of them date back to the 30s, while others arrived just in this century. I know in the African American community, you've got the folks from Chatham or Pill Hill, Bronzeville, and the West Side. So this isn't a monolithic community for either program. How will you dive down into those differences without being stereotypical? And this particular person asked, why not focus on commercial districts that are multicultural? So in terms of the Latinx community, Kedzie, Pulaski, Cicero, that whole corridor where you have so many differences. And I guess, you could find some of that in the Black community as well, whether it's Hyde Park or South Shore. So let me stop and ask, how do you speak to the diversity within these communities, and give us a taste of how you're going to geographically approach your work? And I'll come to you first, Brandis.
I would say this is something that we have learned, especially over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think the best way to kind of explain the diversity within those communities is to go there. So we've been doing initially it was the COVID Across Chicago series when the pandemic began, and it's transitioned into Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood, where we're in a different neighborhood every Thursday night. And the best way to do that is to be in those communities and find stories in those communities from the people who are there. And allow them to tell us about their differences and who they are, depending on what the story might be about. And there was another piece of your question. What was it?
Oh, well, that's really a good start, but making sure that you cover the diversity within the culture, because it's not monolithic for either group.
Absolutely. And I think, we did that a couple of weeks ago. We were in Inglewood shortly after, the shooting that happened on a Sunday night. And then we all wake up to this madness on Monday morning. And even within the community of Inglewood, which is large and whatever the opposite of monolithic is, whatever that word is, multilithic. We heard from different opinions that same day. You can hear from one group of people who says, yes, we need to talk about defunding the police. And then a few interviews later, someone's like, no, that's not right at all. We shouldn't be doing that. And so I think it is easy to find diversity of opinions in any Chicago neighborhood. Opinions, but I mean, that diversity of opinions comes from a diversity of perspective and background. And so I think by being there, that's how you find that.
I love that you want to get out into the community, because that really is how old school way and very much Chicago Tonight tradition, that's how you get the news, rolling on the story, hearing what people on the ground have to say. Same thing to you, Hugo. How do you approach the diversity within the culture, and how do you approach things geographically?
Well, just to add a little bit more from what Brandis said, and with the Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series, and you're right, look, what's old is new. And we knew in the beginning of COVID-19 that we needed to go into the community to tell this story because we couldn't tell it from our headquarters on the northwest side. And it's part of the criticism that Brandis mentioned earlier that viewers and the audience have with commercial media, that sentiment of a media that's elitist, has a top-down approach. We know better than you. We're going to tell you what the news is and what you need to know. And part of that is having an overarching approach in telling stories like COVID-19 as if everyone is experiencing COVID-19 the same way. So for us, it was very important for Paris and then later for Brandis to go to different communities because we knew that how the business owners, how our community leaders were experiencing COVID-19 on the south side was very different than the north side and the west side. And to your point, we needed to listen to them. And that's what's to add to the answer to that question. We're listening. Events like tonight, which we're going to be having the community conversations once a month. It is an effort of WTTW News to listen because we have a bottom-up approach where we respect our audiences. We need to listen to the constructive criticism and the needs of the community in order for us to formulate the topics that will be discovered. So that question is an excellent question. Of course, we need to go to the outlying neighborhoods outside of Chicago, like Cicero, because they're part of the community. And we need the public to continue to keep us on check. In order for us to do the job that we need to do well, we need the community to engage with us, to let us know not just what they like, but to be constructively critical of what they're not seeing.
I like that, and that's a term I've heard you use before. There's a lot of bravery in what is happening now, this openness to really open the door to upload instead of download, to upload what's going on into the communities and elevate it so that everyone can learn and grow together. Now, I just want to remind you, if you've just tuned in, this is a WTTW News Community Conversation. I'm Sylvia Ewing, an old member of the WTTW family and doing other things around town. And we're speaking with Brandis Friedman, who is going to be the host of Chicago Tonight Voices, Black Voices, and Hugo Balta, news director, who's going to be the host of Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. And Brandis is an anchor that many of you have come to know and respect over the years. And Hugo just came to town, and did he ever land running as the news director. This programming, which is going to air on September 12th, Saturday at 6 p.m. with the Latino Voices, and on Sunday, September 13th with Black Voices, also at 6 p.m., is made possible by some generous support. Lead support for Black Voices is provided by Fifth Third Bank, and additional support is provided by Gertrude and James Wooten Jr. Many folks in the community will know that family. The Joseph and Bessie Feinberg Foundation, strong PBS supporters, and Nicholas Antoine, who is making his support felt. Chicago Tonight Latino Voices receives additional support from CIBC, a financial institution. So this is very exciting. Thank you for joining us. You're at the right place. Danielle Miles asked the panelists, she says, I'm excited about these new programs as their background is Black and Latino, but they're concerned that Black and brown faces will only be heard on the weekends. They want to see more Black and brown experts in economics, medicine, etc., and to see people talk not just about violence and not only on the weekends. They want to see more diverse faces during the Monday through Friday shows as well. Brandis, I know that there's a commitment made to have diversity on Chicago Tonight. I'll ask you to speak that, and Hugo as well.
Yeah, that's a legitimate concern. Thank you for mentioning that, Danielle. I see your concern, but I think Chicago Tonight, we always make an effort to be sure that our experts and our panelists over the course of the week are a diverse bunch. Certainly, you know, demographically and racially, but obviously also in a diversity of thought. And the other thing about that is the stories that are specific to these communities, the Black and Latino communities, we're not going to save them up just for the weekend. We are absolutely still going to run those stories during the week because, as Hugo mentioned earlier, these stories are about the community, which means they are about everyone, not necessarily just the Black and Latino communities. So it is something that like we have to work, not work, but it is something that we intentionally try to do just when we're putting together Chicago Tonight during the week. We certainly do it with ease on Fridays for Week in Review when we've got our round table of journalists. That one's always a diverse and always a lively bunch as well. So I don't anticipate that we're not going to leave all the Black and Latino voices just for the weekend. We'll certainly keep that up during the week.
Well, people are used to silos. They've seen it. They've seen this happen before where people are relegated into one space. I know, Hugo, with your work with the Hispanic Journalists Association, you've seen that concern before. How would you respond to that question?
Well, first of all, you know, I really appreciate the question and the tone of the question. The first thing is you spend 5-10 minutes watching any newscast during the week of Chicago Tonight, and you'll know that we do invest in being diverse. I think the mission for WTTW News in fulfilling our journalism responsibility of fair and accurate coverage has to be on a foundation of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, I think we do a good job, but there's always room for improvement. And you're absolutely right. We need more voices that represent the communities of color, and, Asian Americans, persons also from the Middle East, LGBTQ, women. There's lots of room for improvement. And as I mentioned earlier, the weekend, Chicago Tonight Voices is a continuation of the conversations that are happening during the week. So absolutely, it's something that we're sensitive and sensible to, but like I said, diversity, equity, and inclusion is the foundation of which WTTW News works with. And you also mentioned the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, which I'm a lifetime member. We work with organizations like the National Association of Black Journalists. And one of the things that we always self-criticize is we can't just be preaching to the choir. I love going to the conferences when we could in person. This year it was virtual, and I love to see my friends from across the country, and we have really solid conversations. But if we're just talking to each other, then we're really not leveraging the opportunity that exists in being inclusive of others, so that again, we have teachable moments. We're chipping away at these stereotypes that exist that often are reinforced in media about who we are. And unfortunately, often they're negative narratives of who people of color are, because when they do penetrate mainstream media, it's usually in a negative light. They're criminals, they're uneducated, they're persons that are exhausting resources. And we know that certainly both the Black and Latino community and other communities are the past, present, and future of our country, driving not only the population growth, but with it, the economic, political, and cultural growth of our country, redefining who we are as Americans. We're in the middle of a census year where every 10 years, people look at the results and their minds blow up and they're like, oh my God, look at the numbers, look at the population growth led by the Latino community, look at the population growth led by people of color. Let's demystify this. It should not be a shock. Let's leverage this opportunity as we're moving forward, especially in such a trying year like 2020.
Well, there's so much there. I want to let people absorb that. I think that you see before you the future of journalism, what it will look like, the leaders of the field. This is a proud media town that has a rich tradition of independent journalism, and public television and public broadcasting has been at the forefront of that just by the very nature of who we are. So I want to add that as an old Chicago Tonight producer, I think I left after 9/11 because news got to be a lot. But I remember what was called the Rainbow Tally, where we didn't hold to the convention of objectivity when it came to selecting guests. We deliberately tracked and measured how many diverse voices we could give a seat at that table. Because we understood, and I know you understand, that you have to see it to be it. And so there was a great quest to find diverse experts, and Chicago Tonight was the first show to showcase a brilliant, skinny young state senator and candidate named Barack Obama, who was on our show, and we thought was such a clever find because he was a brilliant example of the kind of mind and communicator and analyst that you can find within our communities. So that, I think, fully answers Danielle's very important question. Now, a couple of other things. We're hearing more about regions, and I'll come to you, Brandis, for this. Sonia asked about making sure the media doesn't tell us who we need to be or how we need to be, but she says, please don't ignore the near west suburbs. And I've been very deliberate in saying the region because our support, our funding, our viewership comes from the entire region. So she's calling out Proviso Township, which includes Maywood, Bellwood, and others. And Maywood is one of the oldest Black communities in the Chicago area, super west side. So Brandis, I think you talked a little bit about the geographic reach, but are there any, perhaps you can share the pass the mic or the give people the platform plans that you have and how you might include people from these regions.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so I mentioned I've been in Chicago going on 9 years, and I learn about a new neighborhood every day. And so I'm going to let that sort of a little bit of that ignorance and natural curiosity guide me as well. I'm like, oh, that's new. I didn't know that. We need to get that on the show. But one of the things I think what you're referring to, Sylvia, is where we're toying with sort of a series, right? Or we call it a franchise in the business, but a regular segment where one that I think we're going to have on both shows, and you know, we're launching in 2 weeks, so bear with us all. We're all figuring this out, putting it together as we speak. But we're toying with a series called it'll be called The Last Word on Black Voices and La Última Palabra on Latino Voices. And basically we give a community organization or a person or some entity from, it can be from any community, obviously, because Chicago is made up of a lot of them. But we give that person or that group, we, like you said, we pass the mic. We give them 2 to 3 minutes to kind of speak their piece about what they do, why they do it, and what they think needs to be done. And so that might be one opportunity to hear from folks from all of those different communities. I mean, at the same time, you know, as long as you all are here, thank you for joining us. I welcome your ideas. Please tell me what it is you think we need to know about your community and what we should come and cover.
Thank you so much. And I'll come back to you, Hugo, as well. But I want to ask you a different question. Very often when people talk about Latinos, the Latinx community, they focus on immigration, you know, forgetting that there are people who were here well before many European settlers were here. But talk about how you're going to both talk about the critical issues related to immigration. We had the PIF movement, you know, the Protecting Immigrant Families, against a lot of the federal mandates that were attempted. But how are you going to both touch on immigration and expand beyond what may be a stereotypical concern?
That's, you know, it goes back to the question earlier about covering the Latino community and making distinctions between them as they are not a monolithic group, and that includes, of course, the Black community. So it's about understanding the diversity within a diverse group. And the Latino community is rich in that, first and foremost, is separated by language. You have first generation Hispanic Latinos in the United States, parents like myself that immigrated from Peru that are Spanish dominant. You have people like myself, second, third, fourth generation, some that are bilingual like myself, all that are bicultural. And then you have Latinos in the East Coast of where I'm from that are very different than Latinos in the West Coast and everybody in between. And the same thing could be said with Chicago. If you spend some time in Humboldt Park, as I've done in getting to know my new home, quickly I noticed the giant flag at Humboldt Park and the different businesses around the park. I spent some time in Pilsen and Little Village and saw the beautiful murals all over Pilsen, many of them influenced by the Mexican community, by the Central American community, and of course, sampling their cuisines. And then as far as the challenges and opportunities that each have, some differ and some they have in common because of that immigrant experience. And that's the same things that they have in common with immigrants from other countries, from Asia and from Europe and from Africa, not necessarily just from Latin America. So it's very important to make those distinctions and to understand the differences between communities that perhaps share a language or come geographically from the same part of the globe, but that they are very distinct. When you meet me and you ask me where am I from, as it normally happens, I'm going to tell you I'm a Jersey boy by way of Connecticut, New York, and Miami. But then they ask me, no, where are you from? And I know the question from the very beginning, but I don't say, oh, I'm Hugo Balta, Hispanic Latino. I tell you from where I trace my roots. I'm a Peruvian American, born and raised in Paterson, New Jersey, right outside of New York City. Now, all of the Latinos see themselves that way. They appreciate that they're part of a larger group of people known in this country as Hispanic and Latino, but they first and foremost identify from where they're from or where their roots. These shows are going to respect that individuality. These shows are going to highlight and celebrate not only what we have in common, but what makes us unique, and that's very important.
Well, and that question would fall under the list for the young folks that counsel me as a microaggression, but we won't go into that now. But those constant efforts to have to identify who you are and verify your Americanism is, another thing. If you decide that you need to go through all of the cultures through food, I'm volunteering because I have eaten my way through both the Black and the Latinx communities. I can tell you where to get a Cuban sandwich, paletas, corn, Honduran, tico, what I can help you with the food part. But coming back to
sounds like a story on its own. It's just, I think that's a story.
I know, isn't that fascinating? And the WTTW camera crews can also take you to all of those places because you'll be working with your fantastic production crew and filming crew, and they know love and are committed to the city as well. So one of the things that someone was asking was a little bit of an insider question about how you're going to build the audience for this show. I think that, your impetus for starting it is going to, and by the folks that are participating here, it's not going to be that hard. But Brandis, I'll come to you. How will you do your day job and build an audience here?
I'm not sure how I'm going to do my day job. And no, I'm kidding. I mean, these two things, these are not separate jobs. They are all one job. But with regards to building an audience, I think the best way to do that is something that we've already talked about, really, is engaging with the community. I think, if you were on the ground in Austin or Inglewood, and that's something that we've been doing, be it maybe you're there all day the way we are within your neighborhood, or maybe you're there for part of the day because that is where your story is and it takes that small amount of time to get the story. I think that is how you build an audience, because people see you there and you are able to meet and engage with people, not just the ones that you interview and later on put on television in your story, but just by being there. And so sometimes it is because I needed a sandwich or or a Cubano or whatever it is in the neighborhood where I'm shooting the story. And sometimes it's because I'm there to talk to members of the community. So I mean, as a reporter, I think that is the best way to build an audience. It's that's kind of like where my department is being out in the streets. I don't have the big idea on building an audience. That's more Hugo's department, actually.
That's right. That's another part of things. And you have the strong work of people like Tim Russell, who have been leading community conversations at venues around the city. So people know and they get it. As we come to perhaps just about the end of what I hope has been a vital look at behind the scenes, I'm just going to remind people that this is a WTTW News Community Conversation. You have Hugo Balta and Brandis Friedman, who are going to lead these new engaging programs that are a direct response to this historic moment and that will live beyond the moment to keep the conversation about what's changing in our country and the need to address historic inequities and just to hear different voices to keep that conversation going. Put it on your calendar for September 12th on a Saturday. Now I'm looking for it on my paper. Yeah, September 12th at 6 p.m. is Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, hosted by Hugo, and September 13th at 6 p.m. Is the Chicago Tonight Black Voices, hosted by Brandis. They'll do it ably and with your feedback, and you'll also be able to see it streaming live and on demand on WTTW.com/news, on Facebook and YouTube. And I would be remiss if I didn't reach out to the folks who are engaged in social media. You can find Hugo at Hugo Balta and Brandis at Brandis Friedman. Follow them on Instagram, Facebook, all those places where you look at your glowing rectangles. So the pandemic has struck and made this a very unique and cautious time. The civil unrest rising up to speak out against injustice and in other reasons and causes has made this a very unusual time, but it's still media. And in media, there is a lot of competition and a lot of voices out there demanding that they be seen and heard. And we're also at a time when traditional news, the way my old mentor, John Calloway, you know, and that lineage that comes to Brandis and Paris and others on the show today, that has changed. There's less of a understanding of the unique role of journalism in our democracy, and there's sometimes less of an appetite for rational, fact-based reality and news. Now, the folks who have the good taste to join us tonight, we won't put into that category. But I'm going to ask you, as we wrap up our time together, talk about how you're going to draw in the people. As Hugo said, not just the choir, but what do you have to offer people who want to learn, who may think differently, and who are just going to give you a chance to see what you're doing on the weekend? And Brandis, I'll come to you with that first.
So one thing that I mentioned earlier is that, you know, what we've been hearing a lot from a lot of people, but mostly like the folks in the communities that have been in the news lately, be it because of a protest or because of, I hate to use the word riot, but I still haven't figured out what else to call it just yet. We hear a lot that, you know, the media only shows up when something bad happens. I feel like at Chicago Tonight, we've always tried to not be that media, to try and show up all the time, just because that's where news is and that is where the communities are. And the stories there deserve to be told when there's something good happening, not just when something bad is happening. And so I think that we have to keep proving to folks that this is how we do it, that's what we're going to do. We're not going to just show up when something bad happens. But I think we also have to show them that we are inviting them into the conversation. And by the nature of the way we tell our stories, you know, through analysis and longer form, that we are giving these folks more time, better time to tell their story. Because I think we all see trust in folks like us being eroded as of late. And so I think we have to earn that trust, right? And we have to keep proving to the community that that we're going to be fair and that we're going to give them, you know, an opportunity to tell their stories.
Thank you. That is very well said. Much appreciated. Hugo, same question to you.
The first thing is how we're going to draw audiences is probably the same reason what drew me to join WTTW, and that is independent news, excellence in journalism in respecting the audience and providing content that is thought-provoking, empowering, educational, but that respects the audience to make their own decisions. We have guests that lean to the left and lean to the right, as we've seen in the last 2 weeks in our special coverage of both the Republican and Democratic National Convention. And we don't also just scratch the surface. We devote resources to really deep dive on what matters most so that we can have conversations with newsmakers and provide our audience content that they're not going to get anywhere else. That it's not just going to be about a newscast that is all about pacing and the number of stories, but really is going to devote the time that it requires. And so I think that's one of the things that differentiates Chicago Tonight during the week, and will differentiate Voices on the weekend as well. And I think the last thing is it's an investment in a time of great disinvestment in media, largely driven by COVID-19, but it's a symbiotic relationship. That investment we also need from the public to invest in WTTW News, to invest in independent media, because it is more relevant now, more important now than ever before in our country's history, as we've seen in the last couple of months due to COVID-19, and certainly in the weeks after the death of George Floyd and walking into the election. We need the public, who asked for this. As a president of NHJ and having worked in this space with organizations that represent people of color, that are constantly asking media to do better for people that are marginalized, like the Black community, like the Latino community. You asked for it, and WTTW News answered that call.
Well, that is absolutely fantastic. And I will say that this feels like an opportunity to go beyond the headlines, to go in depth, to really hear authentic voice, and to hear from people who upload information for all of us rather than having it downloaded and pushed down to them. It has been a fascinating conversation. I know where I'm going to be on the weekend of September 12th at 6 p.m. for Saturday and Sunday. I hope that the participants in this community conversation will be there as well. Tell your friends. Once again, I do want to thank our funders. This is how public television works. The public is the driving force, but supporters such as Fifth Third Bank and Gertrude and James Wooten Jr., the Joseph and Bessie Feinberg Foundation, and Nicholas Antoine make Chicago Voices, Chicago Tonight Black Voices possible, and support for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices is provided by CIBC, as well as the lead support that we mentioned earlier. Someone said it best on the chat, from Lauren Chan to all panelists: this was great, and your participation made it even better. Thank you for that robust dialogue. Don't be strangers, get to know someone, do the census, vote, get to know another WTTW supporter online and in conversations like this. And someone did ask, and I'll have to put this in the notes for later, but they said that often they miss hearing about these kinds of conversations. So they asked for a bulletin board of sorts. I'll tell you that if you do go to WTTW events, you will find out what's coming up. And if you follow the station and WFMT on social media, that'll help you as well. But I did make note of your suggestion. Everyone, be safe, be well, and stay tuned. Good night.
Thank you, Sylvia.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much.